was the last time you guys were outside? Have you been outside for more than an hour a day? You know, if you are keeping yourself indoors all day long, you are similar to a caged animal in the zoo. And if you guys remember the last time you've been to the zoo, if you guys haven't been to the zoo as a conscious adult, go. And you're going to see a bunch of animals that are super depressed, sick, and even malfunctioning. You're going to see things like hair loss and even like in the water, like the dolphins or the big whales, the what's the thing called on the top? The fin, the dorsal fin, bent over. So if you're indoors constantly, you're essentially doing that to yourself. So let me tell you a story. I used to own gyms, and so the gyms were completely focused on human performance, optimizing for fitness, optimizing for just essentially being able to do anything and everything, because that was the type of sport and competition we were doing. We were lifting heavy, able to sprint, able to jump, able to swim, able to do things on a full stomach, on an empty stomach. I trained people going into BUD/S for Navy SEALs. I trained LAPD. I trained the like special units of LAPD as well. And we needed everybody to do everything. And what I started noticing is that being outdoors made people way more powerful than being indoors. And so we would train outdoors. I actually had a sidewalk in front of our gym, and whenever possible, we would bring our barbells out on the sidewalk and we would train. And it's actually mind-blowing to me that we were able to do that and nobody complained, until somebody did complain. But that was like 9 years into after us doing it. Somebody wanted to make a complaint about it, but the cops said we really weren't breaking any laws. But anyways, a story about me is that I have a lot of injuries. So I've got 6 tears in this labrum, 6 tears in this labrum, a dead nerve in my leg, which is affecting a whole bunch of tendons and making those kind of get unworking, and my vastus medialis muscle, my right quadriceps, is not really working. I've got chiropractor injured me in my C6, in between C6, C7, which killed a nerve going into this arm. So me as a gym owner, I had to stop training with all of these badasses that I was coaching. And I just focused on coaching. And year after year, when the competition season would come along, I would beat everybody. And not just beat everybody in my gym, but beat everybody pretty much in like this, like, not everybody. I'd be in the top 20-ish in the whole West Coast of America, top few hundred in the world. And it wouldn't make sense to me because I hadn't trained. I wasn't doing the things that everybody else was doing. And I started asking myself the question, well, what was I doing? I was just going to Santa Monica Beach and hanging out outside, just relaxing essentially in the sun, feet on the earth, body actually was like completely on the earth because I never really used to bring a towel or anything. Hands were on the earth, playing on the earth in the sun, and somehow that was making me able to perform on a physical playing field where there's judges and it's not subjective. There's objective measurements of athletic performance, and I was able to perform at a very, very, very high rate. Obviously, I'm skilled and I know how to do things, so I have that, but it didn't make sense that I wasn't putting time under tension. I wasn't doing progressive overload, all of these concepts that we use in the gym, which essentially means our body adapts. It gets used to lifting heavy weights, sprinting, running, jumping, performing, and then it adapts. There's an adaptation to make you stronger. And I wasn't doing that. Yet I was getting stronger. Yet I was, wow, there's a huge pelican bird thing that just coasted by me. Can you see that? Where did it go? There it is. It was amazing. forgot my tripod, so I actually had to hook up the phone to my bike because I have a little phone holder on my bike. Okay, so back to story time. So I was able to win competitions. I was able to place and qualify for competitions that they're full-time athletes. They wake up in the morning, they train all day, they eat, they go to sleep. And I was essentially doing things that wouldn't hurt me. So I was unicycling, I was slacklining, I was just laying down, a little bit of yoga, and then I would have to go to a competition and clean 300 pounds for 3 reps, and then do a 50-foot handstand walk, and then 5 muscle ups for 5 rounds for time versus 50 other guys, and somehow I'd be able to beat them all. Just an example of a workout. And so as a gym owner, I started questioning, like, how is this? How can not being in the gym make me be able to perform more in the gym? And this is like this lasted from like 2012 to 16, where I really wasn't training. I was competing the few years before that, but I was more healthy. But as I started to hurt myself more and more, I stopped training and I just spent time outdoors, in forests, just outdoors. And so I started looking into other cultures and what, the mysticisms of and the religions of the world. There's actually a really good book if you guys want to start in on, have like a 101 in a bunch of different philosophies. It's called The Secret Teachings of All Ages. And it's like 1 to 3 pages, very, very small type, of a bunch of different people, a bunch of different philosophies, a bunch of different subjects such as geometry, and then it kind of breaks down who was Pythagoras, and it breaks down like what is Kabbalah, and it lays out all the secret teachings of all ages. And along with that, also completely reworking science, as you guys know, that what we know about physics and everything that we got taught in school is a program. Some of it may be true, but the agenda is essentially human control, human weakness, human sickness. So even if something in the textbooks that we get caught is technically true, it's fundamentally shaped and intended to control human beings, to funnel people through the school system into the corporate system or the jail system. So it's like essentially worker bees is what the schooling is for. At least we could go public schools, and then even private schools are made to be the managers of the worker bees. And that's the point of the public school system. It originated in Germany. It was designed to make soldiers. So if you guys go back into history, you'll see these things. What's that guy's name? His first name was, come on, remember it. I can't remember it. But that's school. So if we go through school, good for you. You know how to read, you know how to write. You've been through, essentially, you walked up the hill. Like if you guys know the old stories where people have to walk up the hill to find the wise sage or the guru or the guru, and they get up to, the 3-week journey or however long it takes to get up there, and they knock on the door, and the old man comes out, and he doesn't say anything. He just looks at a tree and says, like, go stand in that tree for 3 more days. And so you stand in the tree for 3 more days to prove that you have an ability to tolerate things like cold, boredom, that you're mentally strong, so that he can give you his first lesson, because these lessons require a certain bit of responsibility. And so the older people holding the wisdom, the secret teachings, they wouldn't just give it out to the public, because it essentially allows us to shape reality. And so it's not that I think that schooling, the way that it was designed, is essentially that it shouldn't be that way. I think that it's perfectly that way, designed by those with an agenda, displayed out for the rest of us, forced to do. And once we do it, we're essentially like that initiate who climbed the mountain, and now we get to actually get to the real stuff. Because us getting through school is us, like, there's the fork. We either, that's it, we just take that program and run with it, and we don't have responsibility for ourselves, because school essentially teaches us that a teacher is going to tell us what's right or wrong. And then we listen to things like laws and rules, and we just follow along. It's essentially like a sheep. And the sheep herders they have a bunch of sheep. Those that don't want to be a sheep anymore are free to do so, but you get to go through the second phase, which is the initiation. You get to find stuff on your own. You get to go through the whole process of reschooling yourself, unprogramming yourself into the choices that you would like to be shaped into your reality. And so, anyways, I mention all that because we're all here to do that, right? That's why we're on social media right now looking at this, because you're striving to learn from people that have been through a journey that you may be desiring to go through. And so we can learn from an actual person that's went through it, right? If you think about school, a lot of the times these people are trained to be teachers to teach you about subjects that they've never done before. For the most part, I know that there's people teaching high school physics that were actually a high-level physician and had real life expertise. Experience is the word I was looking for. But not all of them, right? I had a chiropractor. He was kind of like a mixture between Mr. Miyagi and Morpheus from the Matrix. So if you imagine like Mr. Miyagi and Morpheus mixed, this was a guy that I used to see when I was competing. I actually had 3 chiropractors that I would see, and I would have an acupuncturist. Well, the acupuncturist was also another chiropractor, but and I also had body workers as well. But this Mr. Miyagi and Morpheus guy, he told me, he said, it's okay to follow a leader, but make sure you're never following a follower. It's okay to follow a leader, but make sure you're never following a follower. And so the good thing about social media is that there's a lot of people that have walked the walk and then looking back and helping people walk that same walk. Okay, so back to the original story, which is like 3 tangents ago. I was looking into information about where power comes from, because in the sport, we were measuring power, and we defined power by force times distance over the amount of time that it took you. That's essentially the format of CrossFit competitions, which means that no matter what you're doing, if we filled up a sandbag right here and I had to carry it above my head, the amount of force that would require me to carry, like let's say a 50-pound sandbag over my head and walking lunge across the beach 100 meters, turn around and sprint and do it for 3 rounds, I would have to apply the force of the sandbag, the distance would be the same for everybody, and then the time would vary based on the individual doing it. So the amount of intensity, it's actually the measurement for intensity or power. The amount of power would equal the greatest amount if the person had the least amount of time. So if they're able to express the same force times distance and then divided by time, so the smaller that time was, the more power they are expressing. So I knew that there had to be a way for me to get more power besides just training for it, because adaptation wasn't my case. So I started looking into all of these cultures and religions and philosophies and teachings, and I started noticing the same things pop up. And one of those same things was the elements. And this goes in even in the geometry when you look at the Platonic solids. Okay? The Platonic solids is an expression of the elements: earth, air, fire, water, and ether. Those are the Platonic solids. And even in other cultures, like if you go into the Far East, they might have things like wood and metal as elements, but there's still this foundation that makes us up, that allows us to express in a more powerful manner. And I have my own translation of the elements. I translate them as earth, air, water, and then instead of fire, I use light. Because we were taught in school that the sun is a burning ball of fire. It's an explosion of hydrogen and other elements. And so I believe, I know, I have a gnosis that fire, the source of fire, is light. Think about fire. So there's some driftwood here. This one looks like an actual branch. So these are pieces of wood, but as you know, they came from a tree, and you can see that this is made up of what's called cellulose. I can even peel it. This is essentially cellulose. Cellulose is made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And if we burn this wood, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, it's also this, that's what carbohydrates is made of, right? So when you have a tree, it's breaking apart CO2, carbon dioxide is breaking apart, it's releasing the oxygen, it's keeping the carbon. And then it's taking in H2O from the water in the ground along with minerals. And so the tree, through the process of photosynthesis, takes the light, and light through photosynthesis is able to access that carbon, and it combines it with hydrogen and oxygen from the water, and it creates things like cellulose. And so this is essentially a combination of minerals from the earth, the hydrogen and oxygen from water, and the carbon from the air, and light. Because light is the map that allowed for that all to happen. When we light this on fire, the reverse happens. It pulls in oxygen. Fire needs oxygen to breathe, right? So it pulls in oxygen from the air, and then it reassembles CO2 and releases CO2. It's also releasing the hydrogen and the oxygen with these, like, we call them poisons, like the hydrofluorocarbons, like other nasty stuff that we associate with fire is essentially just the hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen mixture that's getting released. And then also with fire comes light, because when this catches fire, it's expressing the stored sunlight within it. So that's what is in our food as well, because remember, carbohydrates are also a function of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. When we eat it, we're essentially receiving that stored sunlight. And so if we're indoors all day, we're only really getting light from our food and the fake lights that are indoors, which have a very, very small band of light. There's like two little spikes on the light spectrum of our lights indoors. It's very unfull. It's unfulfilled light. This light has a lot wider band of light that we are perfectly adapted to. So I used to think that food was more important than exercise, and then I realized that the source of food is earth, air, water, light, and then ether. Quintessence. That word quintessence applies to the fifth element. And think about quintessence. What do we use quintessence to explain? Quintessence essentially is like the perfect embodiment of something. That's what the quintessence of human being is. Like it's like perfection, or it's perfectly represented. And that essentially, quintessence, the etymology of that means fifth element. And I'm saying all this because our source is out here. Our source is in nature. And if we're indoors, we're completely disconnected from our source. And there's still so much we don't understand about what's going on out here. One thing you begin to realize when you start to reteach yourself everything, which I'm sure everybody has done that to a degree, and you start realizing that, like, wow, Santa Claus isn't real. Wow, we didn't go to war because those people were trying to attack us. There was another agenda. First I thought it was oil, and then I realized that it's something else. And then I realized that maybe it's alien technology, and then I realized that maybe it's human power, and then I realized that maybe it's secrecy. And you're just like, you're revealing all of this information, and you start realizing that everything was like Santa Claus, that it's all made up for your basically making you into a square peg that fits into the square hole of society. And when you start to reshape yourself, it really opens up a new world. And so for me, as a gym owner, I started opening up myself to a new world and start realizing that power isn't all about diet and exercise. Power is also about how much integrated we are into the elements. Are we able to, let me just straighten this out. Are we able to harmonize and gather force from out here? Another interesting thing when you start looking into, we all know Edison, right? That's like kind of what powers the world. And you realize that Edison had interaction with Tesla, but Edison was just a smarter business person than Tesla and essentially took advantage of Nikola Tesla. When you start looking into Nikola Tesla, you're like, wow. Someone's asking how to succeed in a capitalist society, though. You mean like, instead of just being outdoors all day, because you can't really just be a bum hanging out under waterfalls? So I'm getting into that. Actually, that's the topic I'm going into right now. So if you start looking into the greatest thinkers, you're going to start seeing that they had a lot of their insights in nature. People like Einstein, Tesla, I can't think of any more, but a lot of people were either observing nature or had a flash of inspiration while outside. And this is all alive according to the ancients, that, like I was taught in school that it was weird that the indigenous people would pray to an animal that they killed because they thought that the animal actually had a quote soul. And we were told that they thought that everything was just as alive as we were, and they essentially taught me that, and I remember that it was silly. They thought that everything was alive, some cultures, even the rocks. And so if it's not silly, if consciousness doesn't spring from inside as a function of our brain, but comes from elsewhere, and we know this scientifically, guys. We know that consciousness is not a function of the human being, because there's actually way more bits of consciousness that makes us us than human cells. There's actually more entities inside of us that are non-human. So there's more non-human entities inside of us than there are human cells in the body. Yeah, someone just commented, I was just gathering information from the rocks to see the world in a grain of sand. Yeah, actually, I mean, what is it that there's more galaxies in there's more stars in our galaxy than there are grains of sand on this earth? It's kind of crazy when you think about. So, where was I going? Consciousness. So we're holobiont. holobiont. And I dissected a research paper on holobionts. A holobiont is an organism that is made up of a collection of organisms. A human being is a holobiont. We are a collection of organisms that gives us our sensation of life. Without the bacteria inside of us, we are a different person. It affects our mood, it affects our thoughts, it affects our physical expression, it affects our health, it affects our motivation, our energy, our activity, our actions, our cravings. And so even just like with things we can see, other entities, we can prove that we are a collection of entities outside of the human self. And so then when you take into consideration that we need to breathe, we need apparently to eat, we need to, like, the science of grounding is like literally, guys, like almost 25 years old. It was rediscovered in 1998 in the Western world. 1998. And then that guy, Clint Ober, he had to battle mainstream science for 15 years until around 2010-ish, 2008, 2010-ish, when people started to validate and also believe and trust that grounding is actually a thing. There's still so much that mainstream science is completely behind on because everybody's battling themselves. And there's still, most of science doesn't take into consideration grounding or light or fresh air, moving air, or the fact that biological entities like bacteria are a part of the mix. And the reason why I'm saying that they don't take that into consideration is because most of the scientific experiments are done independent of all of that. Everything is sterilized. It is indoors under artificial light, away from any sort of fresh air. Think about the last time you went to a hospital. You walk through some doors, you walk through some more doors, you go into a hospital where it's supposed to be healing people, and you're in this stagnant, dead, there's not plants around, there's not living entities, you're just completely separated from this, and you're supposed to be getting better in there. Well, actually, if you look at the intention of the hospital, we know that the patients are the customers, and so the more customers, the better the hospital gets. So then you start realizing that, like, the hospital maybe isn't for healing, but you can start to reverse engineer about why. Why doesn't it get people better? Like, even just things like hand soap, guys. Antibacterial hand soap, is it really necessary to bleach your skin because you touched the earth? There's enough disinfectants in the tap water alone to do that. All right, so with all that said, nature is our source of power. I have proven to myself as a complete skeptic, because I was a gym owner, I thought the gym was how you make yourself stronger and more powerful, and I was able to express greater sense of power without training because I just reconnected with this power out here. And so in my sort of lane of expressing intensity as an athlete, I was able to prove to myself, and I wasn't even trying to, I proved it first, and I had to go back after I closed my gyms to look into this further because I didn't like being indoors all the time. I had to go back and start putting the pieces together, and I discovered that all of this out here is actually where the infinite power is. It's where the source of everything is. And somebody asked earlier, how do we exist in a capitalistic society? And my answer to that is that most of society is operating from the standpoint of being indoors, detached from this. This is why we're disrespecting this. And so if you go to countries where they walk a lot and they're not in cars like we are in America, guys, you don't realize how much cars takes us away from the environment. I personally prefer to have topless vehicles. I had a 3-wheeled car for many years. I had motorcycles. I did go the Tesla route, but in my head I legitimized it by saying that it had an all-glass roof. That definitely didn't help. But now I have a Jeep that I can take off the top. But I'm on a bike today. This is a bike I'm hitting right now. When you go to countries where they walk and they ride their bikes, they care about nature. They care, like Europe, they care about nature. In America, we don't necessarily care about nature because we're not taught that we are this. And so my point is that if we are going to be redesigning society, which is what we've all been waiting for, right? We've all been asking for it. It's up to us to be responsible for it. If we do it from a standpoint of harmony with what we are, because we've experienced it ourselves, like I have. Like I spent significant time outdoors. After, when I closed my gyms, I would just go outdoors naked in my front yard, naked, and just read 10 books. I would read a chapter from 10 different books for like years. I took 2 or 3 years to decompress after I closed my gyms because that was pretty stressful, owning a facility like that, before I started becoming a productive member of society, which is what I do now with this stuff for free. And then the income comes from Purium, where I help people with their gut microbiome, and I help businesses that are serving their clients with their gut microbiome, because of all those entities, we need to get that in line so that their body is functionally nourished, it's detoxifying, and it's repairing itself. I guess I also do some trainings as well, and I have one thing that I just released today, actually, which is why I started talking about all this, which is how to connect with nature. So me being outdoors in nature, I started realizing that it's not just good for athletic performance. It's actually much, much greater than that. Like anything that you could imagine is necessary, needed to know in life is out here. And I started mentioning the great thinkers, that they got all their inspiration from nature. It's the same thing with us. Even if we lose something, I once lost, it wasn't my keys, but it was as important as my keys. It was like the collar for Solar, my dog. I lost it in the woods. It came off his thing. It's like a little, I don't know, license. And I lost it in Mount Shasta wilderness, like woods. And I walked back into wilderness intending on finding it, and this tree like stuck out of the ground, and it sort of popped out of the scenery, and I just connected with the tree and let it know that hey, I'm looking for this thing. And then after I felt that connection, detached, took 3 more steps, looked down and saw it on the ground. Is that random? Can you explain that as just like a random act, a coincidence? Yes, you can say it's a coincidence. It's coincide, right? That's coincidence. It coincided, definitely, but was the tree a part of that coincidence? You could argue that it's not, of course, but when you actually feel the conversation that's happening between you and the tree, there's not even a need to question it. You just know. And so going out here and connecting with things is really simple. It's really simple. And what I've noticed is, just like when you have a thought in your mind and you think it's coming from inside your brain, it probably isn't. That's what people said, I just got a download, because it's more likely coming from the ether, which is everywhere. So it's not necessarily out here. It's like out here and in here all at once, in the past, the present, and the future. And so that's where the thoughts come from. That's where the thought realms come from. And this is explained in other cultures as well. It's how it comes down and it trickles down and comes into matter. And that's what thoughts are. It's like non-physical energy that then we act. We are creationists. We then transmit that energy into matter. We materialize thoughts into matter. And so the easiest way I've found to connect with anything is to take that function of the thinking, like how we figure something out, like when we're thinking something in our head, and just take that and expand it outside of yourself and connect to whatever it is you are looking to connect to. This is also how like remote healers work as well, or Reiki masters. They're essentially taking their energy and they're infusing it into somebody else. And there's people I know that do it with machines as well. They upload a picture of a machine, or they upload a picture of somebody into a machine, and then the machine can transmit to, guys, I just got a phone call, so you might lose audio. Let me know if you still have audio. But this can even be done on in a technological standpoint. Why is this not working? And so if you're looking to connect with a rock, if you're looking to connect with a rock, you just, or a tree, or a plant, or an animal, or your partner who you're married to, or your child, or your long gone, lost relative, or a celebrity that you look up to, or a famous person in history or now, or is, you know, yourself from the future, whatever it is. If you're looking to connect, realize that time and space are just a function of perspective. We are perceiving linear time with our perceived past and future, which don't exist. None of us have ever been in the past. We've only ever been in the present moment, right? And so there's a perceived past and a perceived future that stem from this present moment. Realizing that, and then also realizing that we've never ever been anywhere else but where we are now. And so even though we think that a moment ago I walked over there, in that moment I was still where I am right now. It's like in the ever-present, ever-evolving now that also includes the now and the here. So we're always here and now. And so we can take that and we can expand that into other things, because time and space are essentially just a perspective. They're what we're experiencing as this third dimensional entity that is essentially trapped into linear time, and we travel through physical space with our body, but there's another version of us that encompasses everything. Some people call that God, some people call that source, creator, consciousness, chi, prana, soul, ki, right? So there's something else that creates us all. And let's just go back to God. Like, a lot of people have a problem with us saying, I am God. There's like some reason that's a problem, but everybody knows that God is us, that God is within everything. God is omnipotent, which means all powerful, omnipresent, present, which means here and in everything. It's presently in everything. And omniscient, omniscient, omniscient. It's spelled omniscience. Omniscient, meaning all knowing. It's all knowing because it's everywhere. Omnipresent actually means always was, always is, and always will be as well. So there's something that makes us up that's also in this rock, is my point. And tapping into that. And you can just open yourself up to it or you can think about a problem or an intention the way that you would do it in your own head. But instead of just using the capacity of your own physical body and experience, you can tap into the capacity of this, which may be a lot grander than this. And if that's not working, start to use your senses. Start to, if you pick something up, feel. This is called tactile grounding. We can feel tactile, we can feel the heat, the weight, the hardness, the texture, and that's going to reorient our thoughts around what it is that is there. And you can just appreciate and be open to receive, but you also are a human being. And as long as you're willing to receive, the channel is able to be open. If you're not willing to receive, it's not just going to try and bust through your psychological gated consciousness. Our mind, so this is, I have a degree in psychology. And how can I explain this easily? We consciously perceive very little, like very, very, very little. Like what we're actually consciously aware of is like less than 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of what our consciousness is doing. Like right now I'm balancing on 2 feet. Now I'm balancing on 1 foot. And I am putting this rock up in the air. And my eyes are refocusing on like I'm looking at the trees right here. I'm looking at the mountains in the background. I'm looking at the ocean. I'm calculating there's 5. Well, that's consciousness. But my eyes are having to readjust and zoom as they scan this. Think about a camera. How much power would it need to constantly readjust, right? Blood is going through my body. My heart is calibrating the perfect magnetic environment. My brain is facilitating all of this energy through my body. There's a lot going on that we're not consciously aware of. We're consciously aware of very little. I'm consciously aware of this conversation I'm having, which is a one-way conversation. Now I'm reading some of the comments. Is that California? So now I'm having a two-way conversation, and I'm throwing this rock up in the air. I am not thinking about balancing right now. I'm just thinking about 2 conversations. I think that can also improve eyesight. Yes, it can. I'm thinking about catching the rock. This is not a lot of processing power. If a third person, or let's say a person came right here and started talking to me, I would start to lose ability. Maybe I would have to stop tossing the rock. We process about 120 bits of information, 180 like absolute max. 120 bits of information per second or moment. And that's about equivalent to 2 conversations at once. So think about having a conversation with somebody. I'm sure you guys have had it, and then somebody else asks you something, right? So you're having a conversation, somebody else asks you something. You like, most of us would even stop this conversation, but a lot of us were just like, yeah, go take out the dog. I'll be right back. And then we go back to this conversation. And that's like the capacity of what we had. If this person, this second person, continued talking to us, well, when was the last time you walked the dog? And then we're talking to this one, we're like getting a little bit aggravated because we really can't handle more than that in our consciousness. If a third person came up and started talking to us, we would lose it. It would be like the max of what we can do. We're not also going to be able to fill out, we're not also going to be able to count the amount of chairs in the room that we're at while having 3 conversations. It's getting to the max. So you guys see very little processing power that we are allowed to be aware of. Our mind gates. It gates out all of the other information, even though it's paying attention to it. So my mind, my consciousness is aware that there's waves happening right now. If I'm talking to you and I saw in the camera all of a sudden a huge tidal wave, This whole time when I'm talking, I'm not looking at the waves. But if all of a sudden the waves do something that my mind, my consciousness requires that I need to pay attention to, I will stop everything else, I will drop the rock, and I will turn. And then it'll dedicate resources to that. Another example of this is, imagine walking in a party, and you're walking in a party and there's like 100 people talking, and it's just it's just white noise, right? And you're walking with somebody else, and you're talking to that, so you're focusing on that, and then all of a sudden in this jumble of noise you hear your name. You hear your name. Your consciousness picks that up, and it opens up all of the gates to bring it into your frontal lobe, and it says this is important information. And so all of a sudden you get that important information and you dedicate resources to that. So my point is that there's information constantly coming at us that is gated. It's not open for us to perceive because we aren't paying attention to it. It is of no importance to us. So if we stop everything else, put the phone down, and we put our awareness into nature, into various aspects of nature, we can tap into what we're receiving anyways. Right now, my body is receiving information from the earth. It's just not, it's receiving information from the light. I just am not aware of it because I'm not open to receive what the light is telling me. But I know the light is telling me a lot. It's telling me to be awake. It's telling the animals when to mate. It's telling us when to go to sleep. It's telling us when a good time to eat is. It's telling, like, my body's made to interact with out here. That's why we have melanin. Melanin transfers photons into the body, into the hypothalamus, which is making decisions on which nervous system to be operating in. Are we in stress of sympathetic, or are we in rest digest of parasympathetic? Then it's going, the light created or grabbed by the melanin is then going down into the hypothalamus, or the pituitary, and the pituitary is then making decisions based on the light, what hormones to be produced. Does it produce melatonin? Does it produce serotonin? Does it, like, it's serotonin is actually made in the pineal gland, which is the next step, but it's producing all of these hormones, testosterone, estrogen, prolactin, based on the light. And then the light goes down into the pineal gland, and the pineal gland is producing melatonin and is producing serotonin. And that's essentially the light tonic. So, and that's light, right? So even take our feet and our palms. What is on our palms and feet? That is, what is on our feet that's more than anything else on our body? Does anybody know what's on the soles? They're actually called soles. What's on the soles of our feet that are not on anywhere else in the body at the same density? Soles of the feet. What are on the soles of the feet more than anywhere else in the body? Let's see if I can do this. Soles of the feet. I'm waiting for those answers. What is on the soles of the feet? More on the soles of the feet than anywhere else in the body? Starts with an S. Starts with an S. Sweat glands. Yes, sweat glands. Sweat glands are in the soles of our feet, and they're also in our hands in a significant amount. What is in sweat? Minerals. People are saying nerves as well. Yes, all the nerves and the meridians, which are subtle energy, go through the hands and the feet, which is related to the energy that we actually measure in our world, which is electricity. Electricity is transmitted through the hands and the feet through sweat. What is sweat made of? Sweat is made of salt and minerals. Minerals, electrolytes, are actually what infer, translate, communicate with the earth. So where we are stepping on the earth, we have a high amount of conduction happening. When we touch things, we have a high amount of conduction happening because that information is channeling into us. We just don't normally pay attention to it. So my point is, pay attention to it. And that's the easiest way to do it, is just take the thinking part of you and place it into the organism, even into the rock, or even into Mother Earth, Gaia, Pachamama, or even that island over there. You can essentially tap into the spirits of nature, and it's a progress. So in the beginning, you might start noticing something, but then after 6 months, 10 years of doing it, you start to realize, like, wow, this is way more than I thought it was in the beginning. And I actually, guys, just released today a bunch of how to connect with nature exercises. They're lessons you can do, like blow into a fallen dead leaf, blow your, what you're having trouble detaching from. They're essentially like ceremonies. Blow into a falling leaf and throw it into a river and watch it float away and say, I'm letting you go now. So there are a whole bunch of lessons like that in my paid membership called Self-Expansion App. So it's at selfexpansion.app on Instagram and www.selfexpansion.app for that membership. 7 days free as well. But I've got over 100, maybe 200 practices. A lot of them are energetic, having to do with psychology and exercise and movement and breath. Some of them are just purely about the psyche. It's called Skillful Psyche. Some of them are just purely about connecting with nature. And then also there's a daily practice that gets texted to the app, through the app. And those are just all very, very quick to do. They're called presence prompts. And it's just about bringing us into this present moment. Okay, everybody. Try this out. Anything, connect with anything, like a steel rod, a piece of trash, like everything on this planet has a story to tell. And just take a moment to open those channels, open those gates to receive that information. And yes, of course, you're going to be wrapping the story around what comes in, but that's the beauty of you, is that you get to perceive things from your own unique individual self. Take care, everybody. I'm here all week. I'm actually here once a week on Wednesdays at noon Pacific time. Bye-bye.